Senator Sanders is on the line. Senator Bernie Sanders, welcome, Senator.
Good to be with you, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? What's on your mind, and what's happening in the world?
I'm calling you from the San Francisco area. We had a wonderful meeting last night in Richmond, California, outside of San Francisco. Chevron is putting about $3 million into a campaign against progressive candidates, and we had a huge standing room only crowd ready to fight back, and that was pretty good.
That is great.
And tonight we're going to be speaking in San Francisco at the Unitarian Church at 1187 Franklin Street, the corner of Geary Boulevard at 7 p.m., and folks want to come out, we would appreciate that.
I have been there. That's a great venue.
Good. What I think is going on, I think there's a lot that is going on, and I think politically people are wondering who is going to be controlling the United States Senate and whether right-wing Republicans will be able to control the entire United States Congress. And I think, Tom, what's going on is there is a lot of discontent in the country for good reason. People are hurting economically. People are worried about what's going to happen to their kids. Will their kids get decent jobs, be able to afford to go to school? The Affordable Care Act has helped some, but we still have 40 million people without any health insurance. Many others are paying high deductibles and co-payments. People worried about the international situation. The newspapers today, every day, are filled up with Ebola, and people are frightened about that. And I think what the Republicans have done very, very successfully is, with their huge amounts of money and the Koch brothers behind them, is to say to people, are you happy? Are you content with where we are as a nation today and where we're going? And overwhelmingly, people say no. And then when the Republicans say, well, if you're not content with Obama and you're not content with all those people who support Obama, then clearly you want to change. Vote Republican. Well, that makes sense for about 2 seconds until you think about the implications. And the implications are, what are the Republicans offering to make the situation better? Do people really think more tax breaks for the rich when the wealthiest people in this country are doing phenomenally well and doing better than perhaps any time in American history? Do we really think that that's what we need? Do we think we need more tax breaks for large multinational corporations when, in fact, corporate America is paying substantially less collectively into the federal treasury than they did in previous years, less than 10%. Do we really think that a tax on Social Security, which is what the Republicans will mount, or ending Medicare as we know it, is a solution to the current problems that we face? What about cutting back on food stamps and nutrition programs or affordable housing? So the point is, what the Republicans have done, and their strategy is pretty smart, I would say, is they rip Obama apart from one end to the other, and they spend huge amounts of money doing that. And then what they do is they attack any Democratic candidate who has voted with Obama. And most of them, and so what they say is, if you don't like Obama, you don't like this candidate, vote Republican. But I would ask people just to take a hard look at the Republican agenda and see if that's an agenda that you're comfortable with. And I would also ask people, go to my website, sanders.senate.gov. We have the information. The Koch brothers in this campaign, Tom, we don't know how much they're going to spend because a lot of their money is what we call dark money. It's under-the-table money. It's non-disclosed money. But the guess is that it may be, $300, $400, $500 million. This is the second wealthiest family in the country, worth $85 billion, prepared to spend $300, $400, $500 million to allow right-wing Republicans to take over the U.S. Senate and the Congress. What do these guys stand for? And that's important to know because the media has done a very bad job in telling us what they stand for. One would think that one would want to know what these guys have in mind. And let me just read what some of what their ideas are, and this is based on a 1980 campaign that David Koch, who was one of the Koch brothers, mounted when he ran for vice president of the United States on the Libertarian Party ticket. And their views have not changed. This is what they believe in. we favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs. They want to not cut Medicare and Medicaid, they want to get rid of it. People think that's a pretty good idea. Quote, we favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. I'm not talking about cutting Social Security. They want to get rid of Social Security. I know on this program, Tom, we get calls very often from people who are concerned about what's going on in the Postal Service. The Postal Service is one of the more popular and important governmental agencies. This is what the Koch brothers say about that. They say that we propose the abolition of the governmental postal service. Gone. No more postal service. Right now, as you know, we are fighting to raise the minimum wage because the $7.25 federal minimum wage of today is a starvation wage. You've got to raise it. We got a bill on the floor for $10.10 an hour. I would go further than that. It's a start. Raising the minimum wage will give a pay raise to about 25 million Americans. This is what the Koch brothers say about the minimum wage. Quote, we support repeal of all law which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws, end of quote. In other words, their view is not that we should not raise the minimum wage. They think we should get rid of the minimum wage so that if in a high unemployment area in tough times, desperate people are forced to work for $3 an hour, that's fine. That's good. That's their understanding of freedom. Let me give you another plank in their platform. Quote, we advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children and interfere with the free choice of individuals, end of quote. You know what that means, Tom?
Yeah, no more free schools
in America.
Yeah.
They further say government ownership, operation, regulation, and subsidy of schools and colleges should be ended. There goes the entire National University of California, University of Vermont. Government should not be subsidizing colleges. And if you have the money, well, that's great. You send your kid to a private school. So this is the agenda. It is an extreme right-wing agenda of the second wealthiest family in America who are waging an all-out war against working families who are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars to support right-wing candidates. Now, what goes on is when you turn on your TV tonight, you hear a barrage of TV ads. None of the Republican candidates or the ads supporting Republican candidates are going to say, vote for candidate X. He will cut your Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and nutrition programs and give huge tax breaks to the wealthy and large corporations. That probably will not be in a 30-second ad you'll see tonight. That is the agenda. And what they then do is they come up with issues that they think, wedge issues that they think will resonate with the American people. So these are tough times, and there is no debate that we have got to do a lot more for the economy. But going back to Bush's trickle-down economic theory ain't going to help.
It's our Brunch with Bernie hour with Senator Bernie Sanders, who's on the road today. He's in San Francisco, and you can get all the details of his schedule and where he's appearing and whatnot over at sanders.senate.gov. We'll be back with your questions for Bernie right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Sanders.senate.gov. Check it out. We'll be right back. And welcome back, Nate in Boring, Oregon, watching Free Speech TV. You're on the air, Senator Sanders. Excuse me.
Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Sanders, where can I go to read the administrative rules in regards to veterans benefits? Because when I go to the website, it's like a big loop, and I just keep going around in circles. And when I call them, I've talked to over a dozen different people, and none of them will give me an answer.
So you're having a problem with veterans issues, and you're not getting an answer?
Well, I want to read the administrative rules. It's for my father, and he has conservatorship, and I just want to make sure that the conservator is playing
here's what you can do. You can, first of all, call up your U.S. Senator's office, Ron Wyden, or Jeff
Merkley.
Merkley will be there to help you. If not, give the U.S. Senate, U.S. Senate Veterans Affairs Committee a ring, and we'll get you that information. Okay, it's in D.C. Go to our website, U.S. Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. Give us a ring, and we'll get you that information.
Okay, great. Florence in Tenino, Washington. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Oh, hi there. I'm working with my postmistress, and she's very worried that they're closing processing facilities locally and all over the country, and they plan to stop overnight first-class intercity mail. What can we do? Is the president going to be electing new post office board members? Because aren't they the ones who elect the new postmaster general?
Well, the postmaster general, to the best of my knowledge, is Mr. Donahue, and he is there. You're right. You're absolutely right. He is proposing the elimination of 82 processing plants. These are the plants that process mail and send it out to customers. We are working very hard to stop the closing of those plants. And in fact, this is a rare instance where actually we have some Republican support. And I think we now have over a majority, over 50, I think we have 51 senators on board already who are in opposition to the closing of those plants. So during the lame duck session, when Congress reconvenes, we are going to work as hard as we can to prevent those closings.
Okay. And let's see. Brian in Matthews, North Carolina. We have just 1 minute to the break. Brian, quick question for Bernie.
Yes. Good afternoon, Professor and Senator. How are you guys today?
Good.
Quick question. I just want you guys, if you can, to elaborate to your audience. Is there some sort of psyche or some sort of mindset in this country to where we continuously, time after time again, each election cycle, we vote against our own interests, even with evidentiary facts presented before them. We get nothing out of those people whatsoever for voting for them. Why do we continuously? Why? Please elaborate.
Okay, well, that's a very good question. And the answer has something to do with the fact that political scientists tell us that in this election, in a couple of weeks, probably 60% of the American people won't vote. And of the 60% who won't vote, probably 75, 80% of low-income workers, the people who are struggling at $9 or $10 an hour, won't vote, and probably an equal number, 70, 80% of young people won't vote. So the people whose future lives, were young, depend upon governmental action and what happens in Congress, they're not going to vote, and the people who are struggling the most economically are not going to vote. And the reason for that, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think...
Let's pick that up in just a second, Senator. Hang on. We'll be right back. With us, it's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Senator Sanders is in San Francisco right now, where he's going to be holding a gig. Where and when again is that, Senator?
It's going to be at the Unitarian Church, 1187 Franklin Street on the corner of Geary Boulevard, 7 p.m.
And that's tonight?
That's tonight.
Okay, great. Let's see here.
We were on a call with Brian from North Carolina, I think.
Yeah. And
Brian asked a pretty good question.
Go for it.
Very good question. That is, why do people keep voting against their own best economic interest? And I think it's a question that we could use a very long period of time to answer, but it has to do with what has been created in this country, not by accident, is the belief, if you're a working person, if you're a young person, why would you want to be involved in the political process? Why would you be wanting to vote? It's all irrelevant. They're all crooks. They're all idiots. Don't waste your time. Don't vote. And that's the mentality that is pushed out there. Politics is not important. It's just dumb people and corrupt people and everything else. Meanwhile, the Koch brothers don't think it's irrelevant. They're spending $400 million on this election because they understand that who controls the United States Congress and the White House, that decision will impact the lives of every person in this country. But how you change that culture just is not easy. But I think that is a significant reason as to why we end up seeing people get elected who are working night and day against the best interest of working families.
Gary in Wheaton, Illinois, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
So with the Citizens United money equals speech, does bribery become legal then at that point?
Yes, it does, as a matter of fact, Gary. That's a good question. Of course it is. That's what we're talking about. Now, what the Supreme Court says, if somebody were to give me a $10 bill to say, vote for this thing, and I voted for that thing, my God, I am just guilty of bribery. That's bribery. But if somebody puts $50 million into somebody's campaign to enable that person to win, that's not bribery, you see, because that's not direct. They didn't give money directly to that person. That's totally absurd. What you have right now, and Gary asked, again, a very important question. What you have right now, in my view, is a Congress that will not pass legislation, any legislation, or any significant legislation that is opposed by corporate America or Wall Street, because these guys fund the campaigns, and candidates and elected officials are not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So if the Koch brothers are spending hundreds of millions of dollars and are telling people, you know what, we are in the fossil fuel industry, we're making a huge amount of money by the production and distribution of fossil fuel, and your point of view is climate change is not real, it's a hoax. Okay, thank you, climate change is a hoax, we got it. And your point of view is that we're not going to raise the minimum wage. In fact, we may want to abolish the minimum wage. Okay, we got it. That's a good idea. Is this bribery? No. Not technically. No one is giving a candidate money to put in his pocket. But for all intent and purposes, what you have increasingly, and it was bad before, Citizens United has made it much, much worse, is a system today where elected officials are beholden to big money interests and will do what big money interests want.
Ben in Miami, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. The investigation that you're doing with Representative Cummings with regard to the prescription drug price increases on the generic drugs,
yes.
Are you concerned, how concerned are you about, as far as the Medicare Part D, that these increases are going to force seniors much faster into the coverage gap, and over the next 6 years before the coverage gap is eliminated,
that's a
the
great
cost sharing that took place, the cost sharing is figured out.
Let's let Bernie answer that, Ben.
Cheaper.
Right, Ben, that's a great question. And here's what the issue is, in case people are not familiar with it. Representative Elijah Cummings in the House and I are doing an investigation regarding the huge, and by huge I mean huge, increase in prices for a number of generic drugs. The theory behind generics is that they will drive prescription costs down because the formula for the drug is now on the market. It's not owned by the company that developed the drug. And that in many ways has happened over the years. Generics have been a very important process in lowering the cost of prescription drugs for millions of Americans. But what Cummings and I noticed recently, that in the last year, a number of generic drugs have gone up not by 3%, not by 20%, not by 100%, but in some cases prices have gone up by 10 times. So drugs that used to be pretty inexpensive are now extremely expensive. What we have done is written to all of the drug companies who have dramatically raised their prices, demanded an answer. Will be, in all likelihood, if we have the time when we get back, doing a hearing on this issue. Drug prices are hurting, the high cost of drugs is just hurting millions of Americans, and we have to understand why these prices are going up, and we've got to do everything we can to lower them.
We'll be back with Senator Bernie Sanders in our national town hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us live from San Francisco, where tonight he'll be at the Unitarian Church on Geary Street at 7 p.m. And, Senator, you're still here, right?
I am right here.
Okay, great. Kelly in Los Angeles, speaking of California, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, I was wondering, do you think that the fact that for the first time in a long, long time, none of our justices has any experience in electoral politics, either ever running for public office or ever running a campaign for public office, kind of informed their fantastical ruling in Citizens United and some of these other rulings they've handed down?
Well, Kelly, I think that's a good point, and I think that is perhaps one of the reasons that these guys voted the way they did in a 5-4 decision, by the way, on Citizens United. But I don't think it's the major reason. I think what the Koch brothers and other right-wing extremist billionaires have managed to do is create a political climate over the last 30 or 40 years at every level of society, which has enabled Republican presidents to put forward very right-wing members of the court who have a philosophy that what freedom is about is the elimination of important governmental programs. The idea that anybody could believe that allowing a family like the Koch brothers to spend hundreds of millions of dollars is not going to have a huge impact on the democratic political system that we have is, your point is that they're kind of naive. They don't understand how it works. I think you're being a little bit kind. I think they do understand how it works. And I think their understanding is that it is a really good idea for the billionaire class to control not only the economy of America, but the political processes. I've mentioned several times on this show, in 1980, when David Koch ran for vice president of the United States, one of the important planks that he ran on the Libertarian Party was the elimination of the Federal Election Commission and all campaign finance laws. And by the way, guys, if you think that Citizens United is the end goal of where the Republicans want to go, you're wrong. They want to get rid of all campaign finance law so that the billionaires can give money directly, not through independent expenditures, but directly to the candidates. So they will totally own the candidates.
Take us right back to 1985.
Kelly, your point is interesting, but I think the deeper point is these guys work for big money.
John in Boise, Idaho. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator. I got a question for you.
Yep.
Should we go back to what it was like 5 or 6 years ago when Democrats were in control and people on Social Security weren't getting raises, their yearly raises?
John, what's your question?
Should we go back to like what it was 5 or 6 years ago?
I think John is using a speakerphone, Senator. I think what he's saying is
your point that we went through several years where there were no cost of living adjustments for Social Security.
And he's saying that during that time, Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House. The Democrats were in control of Congress.
The answer is Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama doesn't make that determination. It's based on a formulation having to do with inflation. And if the determination is that inflation is 4 or 5%, people get 4 or 5% COLAs. There were a couple of years where the determination was there was a zero increase in inflation. Now, there were 2 points that I would make. If my friend John was worried about that, then he should be very worried that the Republicans and some Democrats, I'm not going to deny there's some Democrats, but virtually every Republican is supportive of a concept called the chain CPI, John. And what that would do is change the formula so that seniors and people with disabilities would get smaller cost of living increases than the current formulation. So if you like that idea, John, that regardless of what the inflation may be in a given year, it would be less under this chain CPI supported by virtually every Republican. Second point, when John talks about going back 6 years, I think it's a fair question above and beyond the Social Security issue. And that is, let's do it, John. And let's just say that we went back 6 years. You know where we were 6 years ago at this time? Right about this time. What was going on, Tom? What was going on is we were worried whether the financial system of the United States would in fact survive. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
We were worried whether, in fact, when people put their credit card into an ATM, any money would come out. We were worried about whether the world's financial system would collapse and we would end up in the worst depression maybe in the modern history of the world. That's where we were 6 years ago. And a lot of that had to do with the deregulation of financial institutions supported by Republicans and Democrats. But a lot of it also had to do with the Bush administration looking the other way. How could it happen? How could it possibly happen that we moved into this horrendous financial crisis so that one day the Secretary of Treasury says, Bush's Secretary of Treasury says to the Congress, hey, you better come up with $700 billion, but we may not have a financial system. Where was the Bush administration? And if you want to look back 6 years ago, what about a war in Iraq that this country never should have gotten into, which in many ways created the horrible can of worms that we are in right now in the Middle East, with destabilizing the entire region, not to mention between Afghanistan and Iraq, the loss of almost 7,000 American soldiers, many hundreds of thousands coming back with PTSD and TBI, a cost of between $3 and $6 trillion. Those are the wars that we got into, John. So you want to go back to that period? You want to go back to trickle-down economics, where despite huge income and wealth disparity, Bush and his friends gave huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country? So here's the point. I have been more critical of Barack Obama than probably anybody in the Democratic caucus. I am an independent. I caucus with the Democrats. I think Obama has not been as strong as he should be on many, many, many issues. But to suggest that going back to the Bush era ideology of more tax breaks for the rich, and John raises the issue of Social Security. John, if you think that Obama has not been strong on Social Security, that's fine. But it was Bush who wanted to privatize Social Security. You think that's a great idea? So I think, this gets back to the point that I made initially in the program today, Tom. People are hurting. And John's point is relevant. People are hurting. They're worried about Social Security. They're worried about a lot of things. But if you think going back to the trickle-down economic theory, which benefits the rich and large corporations, the guys who want to privatize Social Security, who want to end Medicare as we know it, massive cuts in Medicaid, who want to eliminate the concept of the minimum wage, who want to appoint more right-wing Republicans into the Supreme Court, if you think that's a good thing for the future of America, I would strongly disagree with you.
Jason in Washington, D.C., you're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, I'm so glad you were talking about bribery. When Hillary Clinton gets out of office and she gives a $100,000 per speech thing to the National Realtors Association and the International Recycling Association, is that a bribe?
It's not good stuff. It's not good stuff. I mean, technically it's obviously different than a campaign, contribution going into a campaign. But why these organizations pay people that astronomical sum of money for a couple of hours speech is beyond my comprehension, and it makes no sense to me at all. It's wrong.
Terry in Asheville, North Carolina, listening on 880 AM. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. Ohio at one point had an election where the ballots were diverted to a basement in Kentucky. And my question is, how are we securing that these are going to be honest elections when we have all these hackings into big companies? And should we go back to paper ballots?
Well, it's an issue that Tom and I have discussed many, many times. And I think there is concern about voting machines. I think maybe that's the most important aspect of the issue, and whether these voting machines can in fact be manipulated. And Tom, I think you have studied the issue, and I think your judgment is that.
Well, my concern is even a philosophical one, Senator, and that is that of all the things that we should not privatize, the thing that is the instrument by which we, the people, tell our elected representatives how to manage all the rest of the commons is our vote. It should be the last thing we privatize, not the first. Private corporations should not be running our vote.
Give them over to private companies who provide the voting machines.
Right. Right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And, if my memory is correct, in Canada, I live an hour away from the Canadian border. These guys do paper ballots. They have forever. No one questions the accuracy of their results. They have a paper trail. The ballots are sitting right there. And they get the results out pretty quickly. So I would tend to agree with the caller. I have no problem in suggesting that we go back to the old-fashioned paper ballots. We store them effectively. And if there's a recount that's necessary, you have the paper right there.
Yeah. Ireland just recently tried voting machines and then sold them for scrap metal, literally. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour here, our National Town Hall meeting on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of Senator Sanders in just a moment. If you're in the San Francisco area, Bernie will be speaking tonight at the Unitarian Church on Geary Street at 7 p.m. Get thee down there. You can learn all about it over at sanders.senate.gov.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And in addition to his main website at sanders.senate.gov, you can find a very substantial presence for Senator Sanders over on Facebook and his Twitter feed. Be sure to check those out. And welcome back. Paul, watching Free Speech TV in South Lyon, Michigan. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Senator, it never gets pointed out that the Republican plan to privatize Social Security, which doesn't sound too bad, actually ends the lifetime payouts, because when the money in your account runs out in 2 years, you're done. No more Social Security. It's either get a job or become homeless. Isn't that the real Republican plan for Social Security?
Well, the real Republican plan is to end Social Security because it is a very effective program in cutting back substantially on poverty among seniors. What I can tell you is that before Social Security, about half the seniors in this country lived in poverty. Today, while the number is too high, that number is about 10%. So over the years, we have made significant progress in reducing senior poverty as a result of Social Security. What the Republicans want people to do is to not put money into Social Security, which is the case right now. We put 6.2% of our incomes into Social Security, and it's matched by our employer. What they would like us to do is invest in Wall Street, in the stock market. And I think that is a pretty dumb idea. I think if people want to invest in the stock market, that's great. But that is a very volatile market. I think what Social Security has done is guaranteed benefits for every single person in the program throughout the history of the program. So if you are interested in investments, go to Wall Street. Maybe you'll win, maybe you'll lose. If you are interested in a social insurance program, to be absolutely 100% sure that money is going to be there when you need it, that's what Social Security is about. And throughout the history of the Social Security program, not one person in any year has not gotten every benefit to which he or she is entitled to. That's a pretty good record, and that is why Social Security is very, very popular, and it's why people support it. Again, what the Republicans would rather do is give the program over to Wall Street, where the financial institutions can make huge amounts of money on commissions and in other ways.
Yeah. Excuse me. Marty in Monroe, North Carolina. We have 1 minute to the break, Marty. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, how you doing, sir?
Good.
I'm very much a constitutionalist. When is this country going to get back to being operated and ran by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? It seems like we're losing our Bill of Rights, our First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, Eighth, Seventh, and Eighth. When is the government going to get their heads out of their rear ends and realize that they are elected by the population to serve the population, not corporate America?
Well, in terms of the latter part of your question, when are elected officials going to understand their job is to serve ordinary people and not corporate America, I think that will not happen until we overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision and go to public funding of elections. Look, it just is not complicated. If I'm giving you, if I'm a large corporation and I'm funding your campaign, by and large, you're going to be beholden to me. So until we get money, big money, out of politics, we're going to continue that situation.
We'll be back with more of Senator Sanders right after this. Welcome back to our National Town Hall meeting, Brunch with Bernie, with Senator Bernie Sanders. He is today live in San Francisco. He's going to be speaking tonight at the Unitarian Church on Geary Street at 7 p.m. in San Francisco. So if you're in the neighborhood, get on down and say hi. John in Port Isabel, Texas, you are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you. How you all doing?
Good.
Good.
Hey, listen, I'm a disabled vet, 100%. I discussed with you earlier about the voucher system.
Yep.
And I think if you think the voucher system's working, you're being misled and misinformed.
Nope, I don't. No, I'm not a favor of the voucher system, Joe. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I had, luckily my wife had Blue Cross from a school district she works with, and I was able to use that because the voucher system at the VA here, which is actually the worst clinic in the country, just dropped the ball. I mean, it's not timely. You know, it's. I hate to walk away from the VA system because I love my fellow vets, but you know, something's got to be done here, brother.
Okay, John. Thanks for the call, and thank you very much for your service. And a couple of words on the VA and those vets like John who are disabled vets. When we talk about Social Security and the chain CPI, one of the aspects of that approach that has not been talked about enough is that would also cut benefits for disabled vets. Can you imagine that? Coming up with an idea that would cut benefits for disabled veterans. John, what we did in the recent legislation is to understand that one of the major problems in the VA is the fact that in many hospitals and clinics around the country, we simply don't have enough doctors and nurses and other medical personnel. In the legislation I fought for and succeeded in getting in, some $5 billion to hire more doctors and nurses. And just last week, we had the new Secretary of the VA, Bob McDonald, with me in Burlington, Vermont, and down in Hanover, New Hampshire, to talk to students at the University of Vermont Medical School, one of the very, very fine medical schools in this country, and then at Dartmouth Medical School, another great medical school, getting them interested in serving with the VA, not only doctors but nurses and other medical personnel as well. So the goal right here is long-term to strengthen the VA. Right now, John, I don't know what your experience has been, but for most of the veterans in Vermont and I think around the country, once they get into the VA, they feel pretty good about the quality of the care that they get. The problem that we have in a number of parts of the country is that the waiting lines were much too long, and people were just not getting into the VA in a timely manner. We hope to address that. The VA is working aggressively now to lower those waiting periods around the country. I think they're doing a good job at that. But we hope to make sure that by hiring thousands of new doctors and nurses and other medical personnel, we will not see those waiting lines appear again. That's the goal.
Natalie in Houston, Texas. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Good morning, Tom and Senator Sanders.
Hey, Natalie.
Hello.
Yes, you mentioned that 60% of the population won't go vote.
Yep.
And I think that's because 60% or more of the population, their psyche is built on Bible cliches. And unfortunately, that's what the conservatives push. And they only plans A, B, and C for their lives is to let God take care of it. So I work in public transportation, been working in public transportation for 24 years, and I've heard all of this mess. Oh, don't go vote. Your vote don't count. Them people gonna do what they want to do anyway. And we are fighting an uphill battle because they look at the poorest of us and the most downtrodden of us. And most people don't realize some of that's been socially engineered. We have lead in our water, lead in our pipes. Over 50 years of exposure to lead has led to dull brains, low IQs, severe aggressiveness, and all kind of things like that. So that psyche is there, it's built in, and people just continually vote against their own interests.
Well, thank you for your observations. I think what has happened is, and again, I've made this point several times, but I'll make it again. For all of you who think, especially lower-income people who may be listening, that politics is irrelevant, people are going to do what they want to do, it really doesn't matter who gets elected, then you ask yourself why the second wealthiest family in this country, the Koch brothers, are going to spend some $400 million on this campaign. They obviously, and these are smart guys, they think that politics matters. They think this election is very, very important because they have an agenda that they want to see implemented. And that agenda deals with cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, lowering the minimum wage, doing away with the Environmental Protection Agency. So they think politics is pretty important. Well, they think politics is pretty important so that the rich become even richer, so the corporations have more flexibility in shutting down plants in America and moving to China, so it is harder for workers to form unions. Well, if they think it's important, I would say that if you're a low-income worker, you might consider that it is pretty important as well.
Senator, we have just a minute till the end of the hour.
Okay, I think what I would just like to say is these are tough times for the country, economically and politically, internationally. People are upset. People are demoralized. But what we do not want to do, in my view, is make a bad situation much, much worse. Economically, there is no ifs, buts, and maybes, that while we have many problems today, we are a hell of a lot better than we were 6 years ago, when the economy was in free fall, when we were losing 700,000 jobs a month. People say, well, we're not growing enough jobs right now. Well, it's true. But growing a few 100,000 jobs a month is a lot better than losing 700,000 jobs a month. Giving tax breaks to the rich and large corporations, which is what the Republicans' mantra is what they believe, is not going to help the economy for working people. It will make the rich even richer. So I hope very much that people will get involved in the political process. They will get out, participate, and vote.
Senator, thanks so much for being with us today.
Okay.